Okay, so this is AAM's workshop entitled Effective Outreach Skills for Activists. In this workshop, Juan Endara discusses the nature of effective conversational outreach, including how to dispel myths and misconceptions about transitioning to a plant-based diet, how to put the animals first in conversations and effectively bring awareness to their plight, and effective listening and communication skills you can apply immediately. My name is Michelle Granberg, and I'm your moderator. I'm a mentor and team member with Animal Activism Mentorship. I'm located in New Jersey, and I've been a vegan and activist for over 5 years. AAM's mission is to eradicate violence and build a culture of empathy and compassion, which ultimately results in animal liberation. We strive to build a global community of activists through our free online program that pairs experienced activists with aspiring activists. Through one-on-one mentoring, we strive to generate an increased number of effective activists worldwide because we all know that this movement needs more activists. Additionally, we offer free workshops that train and educate our mentors, mentees, and the public on various aspects of AR activism. AAM is also proud to be fueled by FARM, the Farm Animal Rights Movement, one of the oldest AR organizations in the country. If you're interested in becoming a mentor or mentee or want to get more involved or to donate, please visit our website, animalactivismmentorship.com, and follow both AAM and FARM on social media. So with that being said, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker tonight. Juan Endara is an AAM mentor, vegan activist with over 5 years of outreach experience as an organizer for Anonymous for the Voiceless and SoFlo Animal Rights. So we're going to open up for Q&A after the presentation. So you're welcome to put any questions in the chat and I'll go back to those, or you can simply raise your hand when the presentation is over and ask your questions directly then. Okay, all right, Juan, if you're ready, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Great, thank you so much, Michelle. Hello, everyone. Very excited to be here. Thank you all for joining. Michelle, just so you know, I was letting people in as you were talking. So now that I'm talking, you might want to keep an eye on that as people might be in the lobby.
Thanks for that.
So yeah, so just a little bit about myself. I've been vegan for about 7 years, an activist, I would say for about 6.5 years. I never thought I'd be an activist. As probably most of you never thought of it that way, but it's just something that happened. It's something that's needed. Once I realized that the animals, you know, if they could be out on the streets picketing and protesting and fighting for their rights, they would be, but they can't, so they need us. So I just felt like I had an obligation to them and to share with other people what I've learned. You know, I went vegan because I learned things that I wasn't okay with. And if people learn these things, we give them an opportunity to also go vegan. So I like how you said, Michelle, at the beginning that, you know, pre-vegans, that's how I like to refer to people as well. Even though sometimes we do say non-vegans, it really, in my mind, they're all pre-vegans. It's just that if they can make the connection, if they can become aware, they too would naturally be vegan. So I'm going to share, so basically, yeah, the presentation that I'm going to share with everyone today, it comes from Anonymous for the Voiceless. And I know there's some people have, you know, may have their views on Anonymous for the Voiceless, but put that aside for the moment because the content is very good and it's going to help you be a more effective outreacher. One thing that I want to emphasize is that outreach is not just, you know, street activism with TVs. Outreach is anytime you speak about veganism to anybody, anywhere, anytime, it's a form of outreach. So we are constantly outreaching as vegans, even if we don't want to outreach, even if we don't want to be activists. Somebody might ask us, because this has happened to me, and I'm sure it's happened to you, when you order at the table and somebody overhears that you ordered vegan, oh, you're vegan, what's up with that? Now you have to talk about veganism. So even if you don't want to do it, you're going to have to talk about it. It's a form of outreach. So it's very important that we have the tools necessary so that we can be the most effective that we can be when we are doing outreach. And, we're not born with this information. There's been a lot of trial and error that's been done over the years. Anonymous for the Voices themselves have evolved in terms of what they consider effective outreach. So several years ago, they came out with a workshop that was called, and probably many of you have seen, it's called Holding Non-Vegans Accountable. Well, maybe a year or two later, they came up with a 2.0 version because they realized some of the things that they said in there, they don't agree with themselves anymore through trial and error. So they came out with, Holding Non-Vegans Accountable 2.0. And even after that, they came out with a third one called Holding Vegans Accountable 2.5. And so they have evolved over time. I do recommend you all watching all three of those so that you can see some of the changes and evolution. And the more you watch, the more you hear, the more you listen, the better it's going to stick with you. Because some of the points that are being made, the more you hear it, the better, the better for you. So why don't we just go straight into the presentation. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay. Can everybody see my screen? Thumbs up. Okay, great. So like I mentioned, this is basically the slides from Anonymous for the Voiceless Outreach Workshop. And we're just going to go through the slides. I'm not going to read the slides, and maybe I'll read a few things. Hold on, this isn't working. There it is. But really, they're just talking points for me to remember some of the things that I want to say. So again, thank you all for coming. We'll get right into it here. So the first slide, what even is veganism? So obviously we're all activists. We know what veganism is, but it's important that we're all on the same page. If you ask a bunch of people what veganism is, you're going to get a bunch of different answers, especially non-vegans. But even within vegans, you might get different answers. So it's important to understand very clearly what veganism is, because that's the starting point. That's what we need to know in order to be as effective as we can when we do outreach. So I want to focus on the second paragraph here. Veganism has nothing to do with our health, the environment, human rights, or affection towards animals. Now, of course, these things might be interlinked, intertwined, but it has nothing to do with that. There are benefits to health and the environment, potentially. There are benefits to human rights. We all do have compassion for animals, but it's not about those things. It is only about justice for non-human animal rights. So the animal rights movement and veganism is a social justice movement, and the animals need their own movement. So, speaking of compassion, there's another slide that we'll get into it. We're lucky that humans have compassion at their core, maybe not on the surface, but at their core, most people have compassion. Most people will go out of their way to save an animal if they found an animal in trouble. Even the ones that are not vegan, even the ones that give us all the objections, even the ones that tell us that they would never go vegan, if confronted in a situation where they had to help an animal, they would, because they have compassion at their core. So that definitely helps us. But on the same token, you may be somebody that doesn't like animals. And when I say you, I'm not talking about the activists. When you're outreaching, you might be outreaching somebody that doesn't even care for animals. They don't really like them. They don't care for them. Okay, that's fine. Just because somebody doesn't like or care for animals doesn't give them the right to abuse animals. Just like I may not care for children, like children are annoying. I'm not saying this, I'm just giving an example. To some people, children are annoying. Children, they don't care for children. They don't want to be around children. They don't want to interact with children. They don't like children. Okay, that's fine, but that doesn't give somebody the right to abuse and harm children. So the point is that you don't need compassion to be vegan. You need to understand that there's an injustice happening. It's about injustice, what we do to animals. And when I say we, I mean them. What they do to animals, because we no longer participate in any of that, what they do to animals is an injustice. And I know that we can all agree to that. We've seen the footage. We understand this is why we're here. This is why we stand up for animals. So in short, like if we want to, kind of define veganism in short, it's really anti-animal. Well, the slide says anti-animal abuse, but I like to think of it as anti-animal use and anti-animal abuse, right? Animals are, I say this all the time during outreach, animals are not on this planet for us, they're on this planet with us. And that's something that's very key, I like to say, because people can understand that that it becomes a justice issue. They're not here to serve us in any capacity whatsoever. So what is animal rights activism? Activism is speaking up for the victims in the same way that you would want to be spoken for if you were in their position. It is being a medium of truth and enacting change by prioritizing the victims and not the oppressors. So basically what's being said here is that, you know, we don't pander to people. We don't worry about them liking us. We're not here for any of that. We're here to speak truth and to hold people accountable for their actions. And we'll get into the details of that later, but basically that's our job as activists. Our job as, and again, like I said, I've been an activist for 6.5 years. When I first started doing activism and outreach, I was always talking about health and the environment. And I was, you know, being very careful with my words because I wanted to make sure that they liked me, because I thought liking me would mean that they are listening to me. Like if they like me, they're going to listen to me. If they don't like me, they're not going to listen. Well, that's not true. Okay. Because you can give a message and they don't have to like the message, or they don't have to like you, but they have to understand it. And you're not there to not be liked. I'm not saying be an, you know, not be a nice person. You can spread the message respectfully, but without watering it down and without pandering to people. So we'll give examples of what that means later. And always remember, you know, how would you want somebody to speak for you if you were in their position? If you were in these animals' position, how would you want activists to speak for you? Okay, don't try to be a communications guru. Always remember that you will never have 100% success rate with animal rights outreach. Okay, so I always ask, you know, how do we know if we're being successful as an outreacher? Did we have a successful conversation with somebody? How do we measure that? Usually we can measure things to know if we're being successful or not. Unfortunately, in outreach, you can't really measure it because you have a conversation and they leave and you never hear back from them again, unless they're family and friends. You know, usually if you're having an outreach conversation through AV, for example, and you just meet people on the street, you talk to them, you interact, they give you objections, you respond, you hold them accountable, blah, 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 and then they leave. How do you know if they ever went vegan? How do you know how much of an impact you had? How do you know if your words were chosen wisely? How do you know if you made a difference? And it's hard to measure, but what's important is that the way to measure whether or not we're successful is just reviewing the conversation that we had with them in our head and say, did we say the right things? Did I hold them accountable? Did I do what the animals would have wanted me to do? Did I not water down the message? Did I not pander to anybody? Did I hold somebody accountable? And if you take anything from this presentation today, the most important thing that you can take from this presentation is that we are there to hold people accountable. Because if you think about it, all of us here that are vegans, I would imagine probably nobody on this call was vegan from birth, right? So at some point we made the connection. We understood that animals are not here with us. I'm sorry, not here for us, they're here with us, and that they deserve all of the basic rights that we enjoy. The right to live, the right to exist, the right to be free from oppression and exploitation, all of that stuff. So where was I going with that? Lost my train of thought. Let me go back to the slide. So how do we measure success? So you measure success by making sure you say the right things, holding people. That's what I was saying. So if you take anything away from this, is you're there to hold people accountable, because we went vegan when we held ourselves accountable. We had a choice at that moment that we made the connection. We had a choice. I can continue to choose I can continue to live the way that I've been living for the last, I went vegan at the age of 42. I can continue to live the way that I've always lived. Or now that I know what I know and I've made the connection, I kind of have an obligation to be vegan. It's not even really a choice. It's kind of an obligation. So I was holding myself accountable because I knew that if I didn't go vegan, I understood that I was a hypocrite, right? And I think we can all understand that. Once you know, once you make the connection, if you don't change, you're not living in alignment with your own values. And I don't want to go to bed at night knowing that my values are here, my actions are here, and they're not in alignment. So we hold ourselves accountable, but for people to hold themselves accountable, somebody needs to hold them accountable. And they may not be aware that their values are not in alignment with their actions. I wasn't. If I was, I would have been vegan sooner. So our job is to bring that to them, bring that awareness to them. And again, we'll talk about how we can do that through some examples later. So I'll read the last paragraph here. With the context provided, your function as an activist is to hold the individual you're speaking with accountable for the animal abuse they support and to make them aware of the consequences of their choices. Now, as you probably all know, once we start to hold them accountable, they immediately jump into objections. Oh yeah, but we've been doing it for thousands of years, or whatever the objections that you hear all the time are, right? So their objections, so people are surprisingly experts at deflection. I call them masters of deflection, okay? Everybody, knowingly or unknowingly, will deflect. They will try to come up with an objection that will prevent you from holding them accountable. They will give you an objection so that now you can start to answer and respond to that objection rather than holding them accountable. So now there's nothing wrong with answering objections. Some people have legitimate concerns like, well, what about protein? I've been told my whole life I need protein, blah, blah, blah. Well, you can answer that question, right? But you go back to holding them accountable. Now, if they give you another objection that is disingenuous or not really a concern that they have, their brain is working in a way that's trying to find reasons why it's okay what they do because they don't consider themselves bad people, right? I'm not a bad person, but I eat animals, I wear animals, I use animals, but I'm not a bad person. So there must be a reason why it's okay. Let me figure out what that reason is. So in conversation, they will give you some ridiculous objections because they can't come up with something that's justifiable. So the point is this: when you're having an outreach conversation, I'll use AV as an example. You're out on the street with the TVs, and you encounter somebody and they start to give you their objections. Well, my rule of thumb, what I like to do is I like to give them, and I'm not sitting here counting, but I like to give them around 3 objections that they can give me, and I will answer those objections. But as you know, there's thousands of objections out there. I mean, Earthling Ed has a channel devoted to it. I think it's called 30 Days, 30 Excuses. If we allow the people that we're outreaching to give us their objections, we can sit there literally for an hour or 2 hours or more just answering objections. Well, answering objections doesn't get somebody to make the connection. It doesn't get somebody to hold themselves accountable. So we should answer their objections, but at some point we need to cut them off and say, you know, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate it. Here's more information. You give them the card and you say, remember, you know, every second that you're not vegan after this conversation, you are responsible for what's happening on these screens. And you told me earlier that you're against animal abuse. And, you know, we talked about your values are here and your actions are here. They're not in alignment. We're not telling you what to do. We're just making you aware that your values are here and your actions are here and they're not in alignment. And usually when I say that to people, I'm like, you know, we spoke earlier, you told me that you're against animal abuse, you're against what you're seeing on these screens. But as a non-vegan, you are actually paying for that to happen. So the question is, can you be against something while simultaneously paying for it to happen? Are those two things possible simultaneously? And of course, they're going to say, no, that's not possible. So you're starting to get them to understand that what they're saying and what they're doing are not in alignment, and they can't be. I mean, they have to be, okay? So I think that's very important, making them aware that, and I like to say this to people, because, you know, we get accused of shoving our beliefs down people's throats all the time, right? So when somebody says that to them, even if they don't say that to me, I tell the person I'm outreaching, hey, we get accused of shoving our beliefs down your throats all the time. But the truth of the matter is that we're shoving your own beliefs down your throat. You already believe that animal abuse is wrong. You told me that just a few seconds ago. So these are your beliefs. I'm not shoving my beliefs. We share the same beliefs that harming others unnecessarily is wrong. We share those beliefs. All we're saying is recognize that your actions are not in alignment. And if you say this, but do this, what does that make you? And I always, at least recently, like obviously my outreach has evolved over time through trial and error as well, but all my conversations are usually pretty much the same. I get them to say on their own that they are hypocrites. I say, if your values are here, if this is what you tell me, but this is what you do, and they are opposites of each other, what does that make you? And they'll think about it and they'll be like, a hypocrite? I'm like, exactly. Do you want to continue to live your life as a hypocrite? Or do you want to make change today, right now, and go vegan? Not tomorrow, not the day after, not a month from now, not on January 1st. If you think that you're going to go vegan one day, then you don't really understand veganism. Veganism isn't something that you're going to do. Veganism is taking a stance against animal use and animal abuse. All right, let me keep moving on to the next slide. So we're always talking about planting seeds. I still say that, where we plant seeds, but planting seeds means that we've said something to them for them to think about so that that seed can grow and they can eventually go vegan. And I used to like that. I used to be like, wow, we planted so many seeds today. But at the end of the day, my outreach has changed to the point where I'm on the spot telling people that they need to go vegan. They don't have a choice. They have an obligation to go vegan. It is a moral baseline. It is a moral obligation. If you believe that animal abuse is wrong, then you have an obligation to go vegan right now, not tomorrow, not in 5 minutes, right now. So I'm actually holding people to their word in that moment. So I'm not really planting seeds per se, I'm holding them accountable. If the goal were to provide information, we would hand out leaflets and magazines. So when I first started doing outreach with AB, I was like, okay, I have all this knowledge and information in my head about what happens in the animal agriculture industries. If I could just download that information into their brain, for sure they'll go vegan. If they knew everything that I knew, they'll go vegan. Unfortunately, that's not how it works. And that would take hours and hours and hours to download everything that we know into somebody else. Again, if the goal was to provide information, we would just hand out leaflets and magazines. The information is out there. Everybody has access to the information thanks to the internet. But the internet isn't going to hold them accountable. The internet is just going to give them information. The function of outreach is to make people understand the consequences of their choices by holding them accountable and centering the interaction about what they can personally do about animal abuse on an individual level. Again, they might deflect, oh, I'm just one person. What difference can I make? I always like to tell people, look, if you go vegan right now, you make that commitment, you understand that animals deserve the same basic rights as you. If you go vegan right now, I'll be here again next week with the same footage, because this isn't going to stop just because you went vegan. It's going to continue to happen, but that doesn't give you the right to be a part of it. So what I tell people is, this is going to continue to happen, but no longer because of you. You have removed yourself from being responsible and being the reason that this is happening. So I think that's very key. When people tell you they're just one person. Okay. We kind of touched on this. Veganism is not love or compassion. Veganism is about justice. Your likability does not determine your rights. So outreach is not about how you or anyone else feels about animals. We hear all the time, oh, how can somebody hurt this beautiful fill in the blank, this beautiful bunny or this beautiful, it's not about how somebody looks. Again, it's a social justice movement. Everyone, regardless of how they look, how cute they are, how whatever, everybody deserves the same basic rights to be left alone, to be, to exist free from oppression, free from exploitation. We gave the example about the children. If you don't go around being children, you aren't instantly a compassionate individual. So again, if you're vegan, that doesn't necessarily make you a compassionate individual. It's refraining from injustice does not make you compassionate by default. Okay. And again, veganism is a non-action. It's not loving. It's merely the right thing to do. It's the moral baseline. So I like to use these words in my outreach. I tell people, look, it's a moral obligation. It's the moral baseline. We don't get a pat on the back for going vegan because it's the minimum that we should do. the absolute minimum. Okay, the approach is pure honesty. So again, this goes back to not pandering to people. You want to be as honest as possible with people because they deserve your honesty. The best gift that you can give somebody is your honesty. They may not like you, but they will respect you because you're being honest. I think that's very important. Telling someone the truth is the most respectful thing you can do for them. When you agree with every statement said by the bystander, they will often lose respect for you and you will lose control of the conversation. Okay? They see that your desire to be validated by them is stronger than your desire to end animal cruelty, thereby making a mockery of animal rights. So again, we're not there for any other reason than to hold people accountable. So we need to stick to that. And we have to remember they're the oppressors, right? So can you imagine if the primary goal of human rights activists was to be liked by the oppressors? No, we need to hold people accountable. We need to make sure they understand why we're there outreaching them. You may be hesitant to speak boldly. Whenever you are afraid to speak up for animals directly, like if you're a new activist, like when I first started, I was very shy. I was like, I'm not going to go on the street and talk to strangers and challenge their morals. Are you crazy? But at the end of the day, like I said at the beginning of this presentation, it's not like I want to be here. I don't think any of us want to be activists, but I almost feel like we don't have a choice because the animals need us, right? So once you recognize that, you go out there no matter how shy you are and you speak up for the animals. So whenever you are afraid to speak up for the animals directly, or if bystanders call you too extreme, place yourself in the victim's position and analyze your approach from their perspective. That will kind of help you continue fighting for them. If you put yourself in their position and understand their suffering and what is needed to create the vegan world that we know is possible. Would you consider a respectful yet direct conversation too extreme if you were locked in a slaughterhouse? There's no such extreme, again, people will accuse us of all kinds of, oh, you're not doing it right. If you really care about animals, you would do it this way. Well, that's just deflection, right? Because they haven't even been able to convince themselves, and they're going to give us advice on how to speak for the animals that they abuse. I'm sorry, we don't take advice from animal abusers on how to speak up for animals, right? So what I tell people when they accuse me of I'm too militant, or I'm not doing it the right way, or I'm going to push people away, or I'm going to eat twice as much meat because of you, or any of that kind of nonsense, it's just deflection. It's just a defense mechanism because they don't know how to deal with their cognitive dissonance. So they're not really fighting you. They're fighting themselves. They're fighting their conscience. So never take anything personally. I've learned that the hard way over the years. I don't take things personally anymore. People can tell me whatever they want. It doesn't matter because I know they're not fighting me. They're fighting themselves. And sometimes those people are the most likely to go vegan because something is happening in their mind, in their conscience that they know is wrong. Okay, so moving on. And again, don't talk health and environment is a title of this slide. Now, that doesn't mean, okay, the way, and it might say it here in the slide, basically, we can talk health and environment when they bring it up as an objection or as a concern. Like if they have a concern about protein, certainly you can talk about it. What this is saying is don't bring it up yourself. Like we are not there as health advocates. We are not there as environmentalists. I mean, we might be environmentalists as well, but when we're doing animal rights outreach, we need to focus on the animals. There are benefits to going vegan, we know that, but we don't want to focus on these things because it kind of confuses people about what veganism is. And veganism is solely about the animals. So let me read what it says here. Why do we think people care about either? That's true as well. If people actually cared about their health, we wouldn't have a health crisis going on right now, right? So why do we think people care about either? Most people in the streets do not care about their health nor the environment. So rooting your outreach in these topics will marginalize the animals. You're not going to accomplish what you're there to accomplish if you're talking to somebody about health, if they don't care about health. And like this says, most people just don't. So don't focus on those things. Health and environment have become exacerbated because people do not take animal abuse seriously. And again, I used to do it all the time. I used to talk about health and the environment because I thought, okay, if they know that we can be healthy, they'll go vegan. No, they don't care. They really don't. Trying to hook people with an approach that revolves around what benefits them does a disservice to the animals. Focus on the root cause of the issue, the animal abuse. Okay. Let me see how we're doing on time. Great. Okay, why don't people care about ethics? Well, okay, let's see what it says here. Because vegans don't advocate for animals correctly, they focus on things like plant-based recipes, restaurant weight loss, or deforestation. Now, we're not saying that those things aren't important to talk about, because it is important as well. But when we're talking about the message of animal rights, those things are not important, because we're spending time talking about that when we could be spending time holding people accountable. Another reason is they lead with phrases like friends, not food, or animal lovers don't eat animals. I mean, I say that as well. So maybe I don't agree with that 100%. I guess the point that they're trying to make is that, again, this is a social justice movement. Animals don't have to be your friends for you to not hurt them. You don't have to love animals for you to not hurt them. You don't have a right to hurt anybody, regardless of whether you like them or not, regardless of whether they're your friends or not. This is not a conversation about sympathy. This is a conversation about accountability. Don't plead with bystanders. Make them understand the consequences of their choices by placing them in the victim's position. So that's key. A good tactic to use is to, say, listen, I want you to imagine yourself as this cow in the slaughterhouse, going through the slaughterhouse line, getting ready for what's to come. Imagine yourself in this situation. Put them in that situation. They will understand if you are able to put them in that situation. Morality is black and white. If bystanders tell you that you aren't considering the other side of this, or you aren't open-minded enough, that is a distraction. Again, 99% of what the people you're talking to will say back to you is merely a deflection tactic. It is a distraction so that you can start talking about what they want to talk about. They want to control the conversation so that they prevent you from holding them accountable. So if you're aware of this, you can always answer their objections, but bring it back to holding them accountable. Always bring it back to that. But you need to be aware that they are doing this. Otherwise, you fall trapped to it and you start talking about things that don't matter. Okay, a lot of times people will be like, oh, well, what is your stance on abortion? Okay, now you start talking about abortion, you tell them your stance, or you don't, or whatever, but you start talking about it and you spend 5, 10, 15 minutes talking about abortion, which is completely irrelevant to the animal rights cause. And you have fallen trapped to talking about something so that you don't hold them accountable. And again, they're not doing this consciously. They're just masters of deflection. Okay, so just be aware of that and always bring it back to holding them accountable. There is no other side to needless animal abuse. You either support it or you don't, which is what I was saying earlier. When people are watching this footage on the screens, you might approach them and say, hi, how are you doing? You give them an opportunity to absorb what they're seeing, give them like maybe 30 seconds to a minute. Once you see that they've been watching for a little bit, you can approach them and say, hi, how's it going? What do you think about what you're seeing on these screens? How does that make you feel? And so you start that conversation and you start it with an open-ended question, as opposed to saying something like, do you think this is wrong? If you say, do you think this is wrong? You're giving them an option to say yes or no. You don't really learn a whole lot about them. You're trying to build rapport with the people that you're speaking to. You're trying to, let them know that you're interested in who they are. So you give them an opportunity to tell you who they are. So you give them open-ended questions. How does this make you feel? What do you think about these images that you're seeing on the screen? All of a sudden, it's not a yes or no question. They're going to tell you, oh my God, this is horrible. I'm about to cry. Or why are you showing this? I don't want to see this. They will tell you who they are. They will show you their level of compassion and their level of understanding of the injustice that they're seeing on the screens. But give them an opportunity to do so by asking them open-ended questions. So I'll just walk you through it. So once you have that opening conversation, you get them to tell you that they are against animal abuse. What do you think about this? It sounds like, based on what you're telling me, that you're against what you're seeing on these screens. Is that right? Yes, absolutely. This is horrible. Like, I'm totally against it. Okay, so you've got them to agree that they are against animal abuse, right? So now you hold that in your back pocket, because you're going to bring that up later. And you're going to tell them, look, the reason that we're here is because the industries don't want you to see this footage, and nobody goes on their own to research this. Who wants to see this? Nobody. So we're here to show you what you're supporting. This is what you're supporting. And so later in the conversation, they might give you objections. Oh yeah, but we've been doing it for thousands of years. Okay, you answer their objections, and then you say at the end, so remember, you mentioned that you're against what you're seeing on these screens, but just understand that you're paying for this to happen. And again, I go back to, I like to use these fists. Your values are here, your actions are here. What does that make you? You yourself told me you were about to cry. And I tell them, like, we're not here to judge you. We're here to make you aware that you were born into a system and into a society that has normalized animal violence and animal abuse. And, there's a saying that if slaughterhouses had glass walls, everybody would be vegan, out of sight, out of mind. You go to the grocery store, you don't consciously think about what the animal went through, and it's not your fault. You've been socially conditioned for years to not question it, to not think about it. Well, we're here to change that for you. You need to be conscious of the choices that you're making, and we owe it to you, because we discovered it, and now we owe it to you so that you can discover it. So don't get lost in the distractions. Always recognize that they are giving you distractions so that you can talk about what they want to talk about, but you are the one in control of the conversation. You are the one that's there to hold them accountable. Okay, which injustices to compare to? It is most effective to compare to injustices such as child abuse or human trafficking. So sometimes we might do that. We might use comparisons, or we might use our dog as a comparison, because everybody loves their dogs, obviously, right? But the most effective comparison to make is to place the bystander in the victim's position. If you can do that, that is the best comparison, because all of a sudden they can internalize that, and they can see and imagine them as the victim, as the person being oppressed. Because animals are persons, right? So if you can get them, you can actually tell them, hey, do me a favor, close your eyes for a few seconds and imagine yourself in this situation. What do you feel? What do you smell? What do you see? Put them in that situation, and it'll work wonders. I'm telling you. Okay, so here it says avoid dog comparisons. And again, it goes back to the idea that you don't have to like dogs. Some people don't like dogs, so the dog comparison isn't going to work, right? Some people fight dogs. Some people go to dog races. So that doesn't work as effectively as if you put somebody in the victim's position. Okay, statistics. Give me 1 second, I'm gonna turn the AC on because it's really hot in here. Okay. Sorry, I'm sweating over here. All right, okay, statistics, keep them minimal. So again, I used to do this a lot when I was first doing outreach is, hey, if I give them all the stats, for sure they're going to go vegan, because they don't know all of this stuff that I know. But at the end of the day, there's a couple problems with that. Number one, your numbers might be wrong. They may have been updated in the last few months. You may have incorrect information. They may challenge you, and they may cite a study that they found that had different numbers than you. And so now you're talking about numbers and having a debate and an argument about numbers. And again, you're not holding somebody accountable. So avoid statistics at all costs because of those reasons. You just might not have the right information, or, they may have other information and then it goes into a conversation about that. Okay, reachability and conversation length. So my rule of thumb, what I like to tell people is our message is very simple. If you think about it, right? Holding somebody accountable is saying, look, your values are here and your actions are here, and they're not in alignment. What does that make you? Okay, that's a simple, like, how long did that take me, right? Obviously, you have a conversation with somebody, but at the end of the day, I believe that the message could be communicated effectively within, say, 7 to 10 minutes or 5 to 7 minutes. It doesn't have to be a 20-minute conversation. Sometimes it could be. Like, I'm not saying, you know, keep tabs on yourself. Just recognize that sometimes we get caught up in the distractions, and we might be there for half an hour, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour sometimes. So, and I used to think this, oh, wow, I just had a 1-hour conversation with somebody, and I thought that was a measure of success. Wow, they actually sat there for an hour listening to me. That's amazing. That's successful. But the problem is that I wasn't holding them accountable. I was just answering all their objections. And then they left, and maybe they never went vegan. I don't know, because I wasn't holding them to account. So holding somebody accountable doesn't take a whole lot of time. You know, again, be friendly, be respectful, but hold people accountable. Okay. Not everybody on the streets is worth talking to. Again, that's a good point, actually. Sometimes, and again, this, you'll have to gauge this on your own. Sometimes you might have a conversation and you'd be like, you know, this isn't worth my time. I could be outreaching somebody else. This person is just strictly doesn't want to hear it. Okay, so you thank them. You say, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate it. If you'd like more information, here's some more information, blah, blah, blah. And thanks for stopping by. I appreciate the conversation. And then you move on. You have the right to end the conversation. Okay, so just do it. If you don't think it's going anywhere, just go ahead and do it, because time is valuable, and we could be talking to other people who have an open mind and who want to learn more. Okay, so part of your role is to assess who is reachable and who is not. Many people are just not reachable, or maybe not in that moment. If they want to have a short conversation with you, keep it short with them. Don't entertain bystanders who want to engage in long argumentative debates. We've all seen it, right? We say something, they say something bad. We say something, they say something bad. And it goes on, and it becomes a debate. And in a debate, each party wants to win the debate. They don't want to agree to the other side. It's a debate. I'm right, you're wrong. So we're trying to avoid debates, and we're trying to hold people accountable. I think I've said that a million times. So I hope that sticks with everyone. Do not underestimate the cunningness of non-vegans' guilt and the ability that many non-vegans will have to waste your vital time at animals. Again, goes back to what I said earlier, they're masters of deflection. Okay, activism is not sales. All right, we can skip that. Yeah, so, okay, a successful conversation is not one where the bystander says, I'm going vegan. I mean, I don't know about that. I think that's a successful conversation if they're being truthful, right? Most people become vegan after they hear the truth from us. How long it takes is up to the individual. I'm not sure. So I'm going to skip this slide. I don't agree with that 100%. Okay, the Socratic method. So we talked about open-ended questions, and people are more likely to remember and to understand these concepts if they themselves come up with it, as opposed to you telling them. So that's why it's very important to lead with open-ended questions so that they can arrive at the conclusion on their own. Like I mentioned earlier, I have been able to get people to call themselves hypocrites, and I do it at every outreach event that I do. It's like my conversations sound the same all the time, regardless of who I'm talking to, because I'm always bringing it back to holding them accountable. They can come up with any objection. It doesn't matter. I'm going to answer it, and then I'm going to bring it back to holding them accountable. So all my conversations pretty much sound the same. And again, you get them to say that they're hypocrites. You know, I mean, obviously we don't want to be calling people hypocrites on the street. Sometimes I do that, but if you can get them to say it, they'll understand that you're not doing it from a perspective of ego or because you want to be right or any other reason, that you're actually trying to help them understand that that's what they are. It's not It is not, we don't say that they're hypocrites to insult them. We say it as a matter of fact. It is a matter of fact. And I will tell people in their face, I'm like, look, I'm not calling you a hypocrite to insult you. I'm calling you a hypocrite as a matter of fact. It is a true statement that when you tell me that your values are here, but your actions are the opposite of those values, that's what you are. It's not an opinion, it's a fact. Again, you might think that people will get turned off by that, but I'm telling you, they will respect you for calling them out and for being truthful with them, for being honest. Don't pander to people. Be honest, be truthful, respectfully. And they will respect you. Even if they don't like to hear the message, they will respect what you're doing and what you're saying, and it will stick with them. Okay, so use open-ended questions such as why are you against animal abuse instead of a closed statement such as animal abuse is wrong. Open-ended questions are generally preferred. To anchor and progress the conversation, you should use closed-ended questions and statements. So I'm not saying only use open-ended questions. Just be aware that most of the time we use closed-ended questions. If you're aware of that, and I caught myself, when I first learned this, I went to a workshop and I learned about open-ended questions. And then I went to do my first outreach. I caught myself constantly asking yes or no questions. So because I was aware of that, I was consciously trying to prevent myself from asking the question until I thought it through to change it to an open-ended question. Okay, you versus we. And again, I used to do this all the time as well, because this is a form of pandering to people. When we say we don't torture and kill animals for products, non-vegans do, using we undermines the individual accountability. So I used to say we to kind of put them on the same boat as I am, so that they don't feel so quote unquote attacked. I don't do that anymore because that's pandering to them. We don't say, we don't use the word we because we no longer participate as vegans. We no longer participate in the abuse of animals. Obviously, we live in a non-vegan world and our mere existence causes some form of harm to animals. But what you all understand what I'm saying is that we don't actively, take part in that. So don't put yourself in that same boat with them because you're not in that boat, right? So instead of saying we, you need to say you. It sounds harsh, but it works. When you tell non-vegans that we as a society are responsible for animal cruelty in farms, it takes away the imperative for individual accountability. All of a sudden now, if we say we, they're like, okay, I'm a part of the whole. I'm not the problem. It's the whole that's the problem. No, you're taking away individual accountability when you use we. We need to say you. It makes them think of lobbying government programs instead of personal responsibilities. And we hear that all the time. Oh, why don't you start with the government? Nothing's going to change unless you change the laws, blah, blah, blah. They are trying to deflect. They are trying to shed their accountability to others, right? We need to hold the individual accountable. People need to feel guilty to change. And it's funny because I used to say, I'm not trying to make you feel guilty. And it's true. It's not like that's our goal. Like if they feel guilty, that's on them. We don't have the power to, control people's emotions, right? But at the end of the day, it's true. They need to feel guilty. Otherwise, they won't change. So people need to feel guilty to change. They'll only change once they understand that there is a difference between you, the vegan, and them, the non-vegan. Okay, why versus how? A lot of times, and again, I used to do this a lot, we focus on the how to be vegan, how to live vegan. Well, guess what? We all figured it out. And probably a lot of us didn't even know any vegans when we went vegan. Well, somehow we managed to figure it out. Well, guess what? They will also figure it out. The how is the easy part. We have access to the internet nowadays. We have access to Google and YouTube videos on how to prepare vegan meals, and we have apps that tell us where there's vegan restaurants. They will figure it out. They don't need us for that. What they need us for is the why, not the how. So we need to focus on the why, because the how, they can figure it out on their own. Now, again, we can give them a push. We can give them resources. Hey, by the way, I expect that you're going to go vegan after this conversation. So when you do, you might have questions about how to eat vegan or how to live vegan. Well, here's some information. Here's some resources that you can go to that will help you and it will guide you on how to live vegan. Not how to go vegan, not how to go vegan, but how to live vegan. There's a huge difference. When I went vegan, literally, I did it for the animals because I learned all about this stuff. And I was like, okay, I guess I'm going to eat salad for the rest of my life. I had no idea about nutrition. I didn't know anything about anything, but I figured it out. I figured it out, and they'll figure it out as well. In order for people to feel the need to become vegan, they need to be held accountable for why they should do it. With any other injustice, you would never focus on the how. Let me see how I'm doing on time. Okay, I'm going to wrap this up soon. With any other injustice, you would never focus on the how by talking about how to not participate in the violence. Focusing on the how is in the context of any other injustice would be an insult to the victims and to the entire movement fighting to end their oppression. That is so true, right? Screenshot that. That's very important. We never focus on the how in any other social injustice. Okay, vegetarianism is a cancer to animal rights. All right, I used to say to vegetarians, oh, great, you're doing awesome. You're so close. You're almost there. No, I don't do that anymore because that's pandering to people. What I do when I meet a vegetarian is I do ask them, hey, if you don't mind my asking, why did you decide to go vegetarian? Their response is going to tell me where they are. If they tell me, well, the animals, blah, 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 boom, perfect target audience. If they talk about the animals, then maybe they're just not aware of what happens in the dairy industry and in the egg industry and other industries. Maybe they're just not aware. I know somebody who's an organizer for AV who encountered a cube of truth and went vegan on the spot once they found out about the dairy and egg industry. They were vegetarian. So find out what their motivations are and then take it from there. Okay, we kind of talked about this like an opening line. One good thing to say is this: what we are doing is showing the reality of what happens to animals in the meat, dairy, egg, and other industries. Remember, veganism, well, I don't have to tell you all know this. Veganism is not a diet, right? So we want to emphasize that. It's not just about meat, dairy, and eggs. It's about other industries as well, right? The clothing industry, the furniture industry, the whatever industries, the testing laboratories, the zoos, and it's all encompassing, right? So what we are doing is showing the reality of what happens to animals in the meat, dairy, egg, and other industries. Everything you see here is standard practice here and around the world. A lot of people will say, oh, that doesn't happen back in my country. BS. It happens everywhere. Okay, we talked about that. We kind of talked about that. Ask them what is stopping them from not abusing animals and being vegan. So you can literally, and I've been doing this lately as well. You can literally tell people why you're there. I tell people, look, my job here as an outreacher, as an activist, this is the conversation I'm having with them. I literally tell them, I'm here to hold you accountable. There's nothing wrong with telling people that. Like, you're being honest. You're not trying to hold them accountable by tricking them or without them realizing that that's what you're doing. I straight up tell them, hey, I'm here to hold you accountable. You just tell them that. And you can ask them questions like this, point blank. What do you feel like would be stopping you from not abusing animals and being vegan? Because a lot of the times we say, what is stopping you from being vegan? Well, those words do not penetrate the way that they need to. Instead of saying, what is stopping you from being vegan? You can say, what is stopping you from no longer contributing to animal abuse? That changes their perspective on how you ask that question. Okay, objection handling, we talked about this. Keep it to a minimum. Determine how genuine their questions are and respond accordingly. If you believe that it's a genuine question and they have legitimate concerns, absolutely answer them. Give them some resources. Tell them. But if you feel that they're just deflecting because they don't know what to say, call them out on it. Call them out on it. Most objections are easy and quick to respond to. Some are more nuanced and require a deeper explanation, but they should still be quick to respond to. Your response should always anchor back to individual accountability. All right, it's 8 o'clock. I did want to, let me see how, okay, we got 3 more slides. Let me just go through them. They try to create excuses. Okay, so if they try to create excuses that try to remove accountability, for example, pointing to rural communities, lions, low-income families, etc., don't get lost in lengthy explanations. We talked about this already. It's just a deflection. Bring it back to the individual by placing them in the victim's position and ask. You can, like I said earlier, like I flat out tell people that I'm there to hold them accountable. I can also flat out tell them that, you know what you're doing? I've heard this 1,000 times. And what you're doing is you're deflecting. You're talking about things that don't apply to you so that I don't hold you accountable. Boom. Like you literally told them that to their face. Like I see what you're doing. You're talking about rural communities and because you want to talk about that and you don't want to be held accountable for your actions. And I won't go there. I tell them, I'm not gonna let the conversation go that way. I'm here to hold you accountable. You can't use other people's struggles to justify the abuse that you're responsible for. Just use those words. Again, it's all being done respectfully, right? I'm not insulting them. I'm just telling them what it is. And this is kind of interesting. AV kind of like says this because we always talk about what is the benefit. What is the number one benefit of veganism, right? And I ask people this. I'm like, do you know what the number one benefit of going vegan is? And of course, I'll always say something to do with health, right? But again, what did we say at the beginning of this presentation? Veganism is not about health. So the number one benefit to going vegan is that you get to go to sleep at night knowing that you are no longer participating in what you see on these screens, knowing that your actions are in alignment with your values. That's the number one benefit. The number one benefit is that you no longer have to live as a hypocrite. And that's true, right? It's the truth. That is the number one benefit to us because veganism is not about how it benefits us. Veganism is about the animals. It has nothing to do with how it benefits us. Because I do tell people I could eat French fries and Oreo cookies all day, every day, and I'm vegan, but how good is my health going to be, right? Not very good. Okay, close the conversation. Always end every outreach conversation by asking what the individual will personally do to take action. So I tell them, you know, thank you for stopping by. I appreciate this conversation. Before you came to this conversation, I'll grant you that you were not aware, but you are aware now. Every second that you are not vegan, when you leave this conversation, you are directly responsible for something that you said that you're against. What are you going to do about it now that you know? You ask them point blank. They might give you another objection and say, no, I'm done answering objections. There is no excuse. There are no objections that are justifiable. What are you going to do now that you know? Just hold them to account. And I like how they phrase it here. After our conversation, what are you going to do about this injustice? Right? What side of history do you want to be on? You have a choice right now. We just finished this conversation. Now you know, now you have a choice. What side of history do you want to be on? Do you want to continue to be the reason that these animals are suffering? Do you want to be part of an injustice? Or do you want to be part of, you know, be on the other side of that? What side of history do you want to be on? Okay, after a long conversation, they may still say that they'll only reduce or do nothing. When they tell me this, that they're going to reduce, I say, look, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to tell you what's happening. And I'm here to make you aware that your actions are not in alignment with your values. What you do with that is up to you. I can't control what you do. If you decide to eat less meat, I'm not going to support it. You do what you got to do. We're not here to promote reducitarianism or flexitarianism. That's not what we're here to do. If that's what you do, hey, that's on you. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm here to tell you what's happening. What you do with that is up to you. And it will define who you are. It will define who you are and your character. Who do you want to be? So this is the last slide. Always end every outreach conversation by asking what the, oh no, we already talked about this. An effective statement in this situation can be, so keep in mind that for however long you're not vegan, animals will be abused and tortured because of you. So when you're ready to stop abusing animals and align your actions with your words, you know what to do. So think about what side of history you want to stand on, basically kind of like what I said. And then again, you give them a resource card, and that's pretty much it. I think that concludes the presentation. Thank you so much. I'm ready for Q&A.
Oh my gosh, Juan, that was really, really incredible. I think we need to give a silent round of applause over there, everyone. That was so excellent with so many practical tips, and it was really, really inspiring. But Juan, you can close your screen share. Stop sharing. And we can open it up. As we said, we're going to open it up to questions right now. So who has, certainly you must have a question. If you have a question, go ahead and hit the little hand raising icon, and I'm going to call on you, whoever does so first come, first serve. So questions like objections, like how to handle an objection is a good question, a specific objection, a specific situation, or if you want to like run it by Juan and say, hey, did I do a good job or did I not do a good job? All right, we're starting with Shreya. Shreya, go ahead and unmute yourself, ask your question.
Hey, first off, that was a fabulous presentation. You hit on so many important points, and really, really loved it, Juan. Great session. I guess, well, I agree with, centering the animals, and that's why we're here. That's why we're, really championing this movement. But I also am wondering about when we talk about social justice, and of course people are going to be like, oh, what about the kids in this country, or what about the people suffering here? Yes, we know that there are people doing the work related to different issues. So I see, there's a good way to address that. And like you said, people bring up things like abortion and racism, homophobia, and all sorts of other issues. And one thing that I think about is when we're also trying to show that all oppression is in a way related, and so all social justice issues are connected, and the idea of collective liberation, how do we still keep, or in your experience, how have you been able to center the animals while also acknowledging these other issues? Just from your experience, what's an effective way to do that without diminishing other issues, and most importantly, not diminishing the animals?
Sure, and that's a great question. I appreciate that. Thank you. So again, I'm going to go back to something very simply that I said, is that be honest. Tell them exactly, without falling trap to deflection and talking about other issues, because we're there at that moment for the animals. What I say to people is, look, absolutely, there are definitely other causes and issues, and some of us in the animal rights movement fight for many other causes. But today, in this moment right now, we are fighting for the animals. Now, I'll give you an example. I was at an Orlando Cube. It was a super cube a couple years ago. And a couple asked me, or the gentleman asked me, he's like, because there's a lot of homeless in that area where we were doing outreach. And they're like, well, why aren't you fighting for the homeless? Again, a deflection tactic, right? The homeless issue is a real issue, right? And may or may not choose to fight for it. Like, time is limited, right? So we choose to fight for what we want to fight for, right? But the point is this. I said to him, look, let's pretend for a second that I was out here. I said, first of all, are you responsible for the homeless issue? Are you directly like doing something that's causing the homeless issue? Okay, probably not, but you want me to fight out here because you're not responsible for that. You don't want me out here because you are responsible for animal cruelty and animal use and animal abuse. So I will call them out on it. I will say, look, I understand what you're doing here. You don't want to be held accountable for things that you are responsible for, and you'd rather that I fight for things that you are not responsible for. But I said to him, let's imagine for a second I was out here for the homeless. What's to stop you from saying, approaching me with the same idea and say, hey, what about the children in Syria? So should I fight for the children in Syria and not the homeless? I mean, we could just go on and on and on. We can always find another cause that we could be fighting for, but like I tell people, in this moment, in these 2 hours that I'm here, I'm focused on the animals. It doesn't mean that I don't focus on or fight for other causes. But we need to recognize, again, that a lot of the times they say this just merely as a deflection tactic. That's all. So I hope that answers the question. Again, just be honest.
Oh yeah, that was a very beautiful answer, and especially when you, it's funny because I was thinking about this earlier today as well with, you know, all of these other issues like the houselessness crisis. Like, yes, we're not, like the difference between being directly and indirectly. We're not directly contributing to it, but perhaps in some form or the other, like our taxpayer money, et cetera, et cetera. So those are not directly within our control. However, paying for products that are directly torturing animals, that's a clear distinction. So yes, that takes a huge weight off of my head now to put it that way. So thank you.
I'll give you another quick example, just real quick. If somebody wanted to talk to me about abortion, and of course, I recognize it was a deflection tactic, and I didn't give them an answer because I knew that no matter what answer I give them, it's going to backfire. So I said, that's not why I'm here. It's not important. I'm not here to talk about abortion. Oh, so I already know what side of the abortion you stand on. I'm like, no, you don't. I haven't answered you. You don't know anything. That's not why I'm here. And long story short, I said to them, look, why don't you set up a cube of abortion? And when I pass by you, then we can have a discussion about abortion. But right now we're talking about animals. So, yeah.
Thank you, Shreya, very much. Great question. Next is Denzel. You can unmute and ask your question.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, great presentation. My question is kind of a two-part question, if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay, the first part, initially you said something about, you said basically after 3 objections, you like to cut people off. I was wondering how you typically go about that.
Okay, good question. Yeah, when I say cut people off, it sounds kind of rude. You know, and again, I'm not sitting there counting, okay, they already gave me 2 objections, they get 1 more. I'm not, the point that I'm trying to make is that don't fall trap into lengthy conversations about objections that they give you, because we feel, at least I used to feel this way, if they give me an objection, it's my job to answer that objection, right? Yeah. But the problem is that, and I'm sure many of you have experiences, they give you an objection, you answer it. They don't acknowledge that you answered it. They move on directly to the next objection. You answer that objection, they don't acknowledge that you responded to that objection. They'll just move on to the next objection. And what's happening is that their brain is looking for reasons to justify what they're doing. They're not actually really concerned about those objections. They're not. They're just trying to justify it. So if we spend too much time on objections, we're not doing our job. We're not really affecting change, because the more that we spend answering objections, the less time we spend holding people accountable. That's basically my point. So I guess what I'm trying to say is don't spend an hour with somebody, answer their objections, figure out if they're being genuine concerns that you might want to respond to, but they're going to start coming up with the plants have feelings and the what about lions eat meat and all of this stuff. At the end of the day, you don't want to sit there and respond to all those objections because you're wasting your time, and time is very valuable. So that's basically my response to that.
So what is your method of like departing from those objections?
Okay. So I will answer. I'll have a conversation with them. You know, it'll be flowing, and like, you know, I'll determine. At some point I'll be like, okay, this is getting lengthy. I can see that they are just looking for justifications. Once I realize that they're just looking for excuses, I will say, listen, I'll, again, being honest, I will tell them, look, I understand you have some objections. There's a lot of information online. I can actually give you some resources that will answer all those questions that you have. But, you know, we can sit here for hours. I tell them this, we can sit here for hours and I can answer every single objection that you have, every single question and argument that you have. I'm happy to answer it for you, but it's going to take a long time. And I don't know that that's going to it's going to be effective. And that's when I tell them I'm actually here not to really answer those objections. I'm here to hold you accountable for the actions that you see on these screens. You're responsible for this. And if you're not okay with what you're seeing, you need to figure it out. You need to go vegan now, today, right now, at this moment, in this minute. That's what you need to do, because it's a moral, you have a moral obligation to the animals to be vegan. And so, and I'll tell them, I say, here's some more information. Thank you for stopping by. I appreciate the conversation. If anything else that I can do for you, let me know, but I appreciate it. Thank you. Here's some more information. Have a nice day. And I think that seems to work pretty well for me. Like, they don't go away like upset or like anything like that. They recognize that I said everything I needed to say, and now I need to move on to the next person. This is a numbers game to me. Like, I play poker. I'm all about numbers. So the more people that I reach, the more impact that I'm having as an individual, in my opinion. Obviously, I don't want to have a 30-second conversation, but I don't want to have a 30-minute conversation, because the messages can be communicated very simply within 5 to 7 minutes to 10 minutes. So once I reach that point, thank you so much for stopping by. Appreciate it. Here's some more information. And then you move on to the next conversation. The more conversations I have, the more of an impact that I feel that I'm making. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree. Thank you for that response. The second part of the question, or it's kind of related, is when you call people out on their deflections, do you find them to be more honest after that?
You would think so, right? But we humans, it's really funny, like human psychology and human behavior. It's like, you would think that they would be more honest, but they'll just continue on with because their brain, they're not actually consciously thinking. Their brain is like searching for like, how can I justify it? And so they'll continue giving you sometimes ridiculous arguments. Now, sometimes, yeah, they'll be more honest with you. And another quick example, a guy came to a cube once, and he just by himself, he just started yelling, yeah, what about plants? What about plants? What about plants have feelings? And he was like, unhinged, and we ignored him. He left, he came back like an hour later, same thing. Hey, what about plants? What about, so I went up to him, and I'm like, look, is there something I can help you with? I mean, what's going on here? Like, he's like, well, what about plants? And I said, look, there's two ways to respond to this. There's a way that I normally respond, but there's this way that I'm going to respond now. And I said to him, you're full of shit and you know it. I called him out on it, because like, give me a break with this plants have feelings crap, right? So I no longer entertain those questions. I call people out. I say, you're full of shit and you know it. If you have a real question, let me know. But plants have feelings is BS and you know it. And you know what he said to me? And I said to him, I said, I don't know what kind of day you're having, but you're not going to come out and take it out on us. And he said, and his demeanor completely changed. You wouldn't think that this is how it changed, but it did. He said, you know what? You're right. I am having a bad day, and I did need to take it out on somebody. And you're right, blah, blah, blah. And then he calmed down. We started talking. We had a good conversation. And at the end of the day, he actually shook my hand and took a card. So he came in here unhinged, and I called him out on it, and he respected me for doing so. And again, it's not about my ego. It's about, people will respect you if you're honest with them. And I was being honest with him. You're full of shit and you know it. I couldn't be more honest than that. And he understood that that's what I was doing. And that's why he stuck around, and we had a conversation, and he shook my hand at the end of that. So don't be afraid to call people out. Always do it from a perspective of, you're trying to help them. You're not trying to be right, or it's not about your ego, or it's not about insulting somebody. It's about, you're there to help them, and you wish that somebody would have helped you, because we all know the saying, if we would have known sooner, we would have gone vegan sooner. Like, that's our biggest regret, right? Not having gone vegan sooner. So we owe it to other people to be as blunt and as truthful and as honest as possible, respectfully.
Okay. Thank you, Denzel. Great.
Thank you.
Next, Bobby, you can unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the health approach, because you said that people don't care about their health, but I would argue that there's nothing in this country people spend more money on than their health. And the fact that people are eating animals is because it's a perceived and false necessity that they have to eat animals to survive for their health. And if we ignore this, I'm just curious, we're not really approaching them from where they're actually coming from.
Yeah, I hear you. So, yeah, that's a great question. So the way, so let me rephrase what I said. Okay. It's funny because like 70% of the population is like either overweight or obese, and like the #1 killer in this country is heart disease, and all of these things, like with the proper amount of research, you know, like if you learn how to eat properly, excuse me, forget about veganism. If you just learn how to eat properly, a lot of these things could be avoided. But when you have such a high percentage of the population, it leads me to believe that they care more about their taste pleasure and immediate self-gratification than their health. They do spend a lot of money on health because they are forced to at some point. Otherwise, they're going to die. But I guess, you know, I think that it's important to say this. This is what I do say when the health topic does come up. Like I said this the other day, I spoke at Barry University. I did a presentation on veganism, and I said, look, I wouldn't be up here on this stage speaking to you all if it wasn't true that we can be healthy as vegans. If we had to eat animals for survival or for our health or for our sustenance or to thrive, I wouldn't be up here because I wouldn't have a case. But the fact of the matter is that we can be healthy, and the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, which consists of over 100,000 of the world's leading nutritionists, have unequivocally come out with a position statement saying that you can be healthy as a vegan across all stages of the life cycle. So that's good enough for me to know that I don't need to eat animal. I know that we were, and I tell people this, I know that we were brought into this world. And in the presentation, I say, you know, Gary Yourofsky, one of the greatest activists of our time, says there are 4 reasons why we eat meat, dairy, and eggs: convenience, tradition, taste, pleasure, and culture, I think is what he says. And none of those are justifications for eating animals, but there is, I like to say there is a 5th reason, and it's what you touched on, Bobby, is that we've been led to believe that it's necessary, natural, and normal to eat animals. But in this day and age, in 2020, when we were growing up, when I was a kid, all of the information that I had came from the education system, which had the food pyramid, which had meat and dairy and eggs and all that stuff. And so that's what we believed because that's what we were taught. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have access to research and access to information. There was no social medias where people can share this information. We just grew up thinking this is the way that it is. And a lot of people still believe that, but it is our job to let them know that the Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics, the world's leading professionals in nutrition, they have come out with a position statement saying that we can be healthy as vegans so long as we properly plan our diet, which is true. Because like I said earlier, I could eat French fries and Oreo cookies every day, all day, and I'm technically vegan, but I'm not going to be healthy because I didn't properly plan my diet. So we can be healthy as vegans. That's my response to them. I'm not saying don't speak about health, answer their concerns, their legitimate concerns. In that fashion, that's the way that I do. I reference a legitimate organization with professionals in the industry, and then I move on from there.
Right. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you for that question, Bobby. And next is Andre. Do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Unmute. You're muted.
Oh, I see. Thank you for the presentation, Juan. Second time in here, and I'm still learning. And I wanted to ask you a question that I wasn't able to ask the other time. It's regarding the channels, like the why on the way why we are outreaching people, holding them accountable. Everything stays the same, but in today's world in which we have different channels that have different speeds of for response, different lengths of messages that could be shared, for example, social media. I'm specifically asking for social media and written communication in which the tone can be misinterpreted. We don't have the facial expressions to communicate effectively as we do in person. How can we take this route and have this conversation to hold people accountable without them getting defensive and just not leaving the conversation?
Great question, Andres. By the way, Andres is my mentee and he's about to graduate.
Thank you.
But no, that's a good question. So I'm probably not the best person to ask about online social media activism, but I do take the same approach. I'm honest with people. I'm blunt, and they do get defensive. But remember, you're also dealing with a lot of trolls, and so sometimes it's time wasted when you're dealing with trolls, because that's what they're doing, is they're trolling. So you do kind of have to, you know, understand who is on the other side of that communication. Like, is it worth your time? If you'll notice, in a live setting, when you're outreaching a person in person, rarely will they ever insult you to your face. Rarely will they ever say these things. And the ones that do, they just walk by. Like, we're at a cube and somebody might be like, oh, I love bacon, and they keep walking. But if you're having a conversation with somebody, rarely will that happen, right? But online is a different story. Online, they will try to trigger you. They will try to, they'll send you pictures of meat or pictures of animals being slaughtered. I mean, so naturally, like, our response is going to be different than it would be in a live situation. So just recognize, just be cognizant of who you're speaking to, and make a determination if it's worth your while, worth your energy, worth your time to continue that conversation or not. And so what I've been doing a lot lately, because again, I fell victim, I don't want to say victim, but I fell for these traps talking to, sometimes I would have hour-long conversations on social media, just going back and forth. And I'm like, what an absolute waste of time. Because at the end of the day, again, you can give the message very simply and hold people accountable. And sometimes I'll just tell them, look, this objection you're giving me, I'm not even going to respond to it because it doesn't justify the abuse. It just doesn't. And I tell people, if you were in the animal's position, you would not accept what you just told me as a justification for the abuse. And I think that's very powerful, because sometimes people will say, well, we've been doing it for thousands of years, even online or in a live setting. If you go back to them and say, if you were in the victim's position, would you accept that as a justification for your abuse and for somebody killing you? Right? So nothing changes really online and in live. Like, the message is the same. You hold people accountable. If they get defensive, you can call them out on it. I said, look, I understand you're getting defensive, and that's the first step to change. I'm glad to see you're getting defensive, because you cannot make change without first becoming defensive, because you have been indoctrinated. You have been socially conditioned to believe these things, and I'm challenging you. And now you have these feelings of defensiveness, and that's necessary for you to make change. Again, have these conversations with people without trying to insult or without ego. You're there to help them.
Yeah, thank you for that answer. I didn't direct my question appropriately because I wanted to direct to the people that you already know, people that follow you because you know them in person since before you became vegan. Mm-hmm. So maybe they're curious, so there's an opportunity there, and they haven't stopped following you despite what you have shared, which may be very graphic. And they, for example, the other day I shared something regarding a comparison between the human Holocaust, the Nazi Holocaust, and the animal Holocaust. And there's a cause of mine in which we have had several discussions, and I'm bringing this because I'm sure that it has happened to most of us, that we were not vegan for X amount of time and now we are. So we're having this conversation with people that already had an image of us, and that image that they have of us has changed, and we are making them evaluate their belief systems. So it's a very disruptive thing. So they're going to definitely engage in conversations with us. Even if it gets heated, they're going to engage. It may end in people just getting away from you, stop following you in social media. But when they reach out to you, I think we have an opportunity. And I still haven't found a way, because I still feel that today, that when I engage in a conversation with this person, I'm thinking, I'm not going to pander. but I don't want to seem rude because they know me. And I don't want to just push them away and say, oh, Andres just became a pushy person and he's a pain.
Great question, Andres. So a couple things. Number one, it doesn't matter what you do, what you say, how you say it, when you say it, how soft you are, how blunt you are, it doesn't matter. You will always get accused of doing it wrong, always. Okay, so that's important to understand, because they are looking for a reason to blame it on you. Okay, so what was I going to say? Can you repeat the question real quick? The specific question.
You already know the person. What needs to change regarding the length of messages to avoid miscommunication, because there's no tone, there's no facial expression? How can this conversation go for you to be effective? And yeah, just be effective to be able to hold them accountable, because you're not going to have the same amount in 7 to 10 minutes to talk about everything you can do in person. And maybe these conversations, when they're in text, they can take a day, 2 days, 3 days, a week. But you don't have to spend much time, maybe one message a day. But
Right,
it
so
can go forward, backwards.
So what I was going to say, like you mentioned that a lot of us were not born vegan. So what I like to tell people is, look, I'm not here to judge you. Okay, that's not what I'm here for. Okay, what I do tell people is, listen, you need to judge yourself. Now that you know, you need to hold yourself accountable. You need to judge yourself, but that's not what I'm here to do, to judge you. But I do tell them, look, I changed because there's a saying, what's the saying? The more you know, somebody can help me. The more you know, the better you do, something like that. So now that I know,
not that you know, you do better.
Yeah, know better, you know better, you do better. So when they try to say, well, you weren't vegan, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's true. I wasn't vegan, but now that I know better, I do better. And now that you know better, you need to do better. And say, look, I'm fighting for the animals the way you would want me to fight for you if you were in their situation. This isn't personal. This is what I do. And the sooner you go vegan, the sooner you will thank yourself, not me. The sooner you will thank yourself, because our biggest regret is that we didn't go vegan sooner. So, you know, words like that, I think, can help. You let them know that it's not personal, and let them know that this is what you do. You speak for the animals in the way that they would want to be spoken for if they were in that situation. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, definitely, that helps.
Thank you, Andres. That was a great question. We're going to just have time before we wrap up for one more question. So Haitham, you have a question, you can unmute, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Juan. This was really informative and helpful. My question is, if you have activists who tell you that, you know, making a vegan or two isn't going to change anything because, you know, animal ag is subsidized by the government, and this is really a waste of time. We need systemic change, and this is counterproductive because you could instead be using your time to influence policy. So what do you respond to those people who say that?
When you say those people, are you talking about vegans or non-vegans?
Yeah, vegan activists, even.
Vegan activists, okay. Yeah, so yeah, I know where you're coming from. So a lot of people are like anti-outreach or whatever. Actually, somebody told me that once, that a vegan activist are like, oh, I'm anti-outreach. And this is why I start the presentation saying any form of communication when you speak about veganism is a form of outreach. So I don't understand how somebody can be anti-outreach. But to answer your question is, yes, absolutely. We should come at it from all angles, right? We should be lobbying. We should be trying to change laws. We need to do it from all angles. And outreach is one of those arms, you know, the tentacles. You might think that it's a waste of time, but I guess we disagree. You know, I think that I'm very effective, and you don't know who you may influence. Like, let's say Earthling Ed came to a Cube of Truth before he was vegan, and he had a conversation with me. And I happened to hold him accountable, and he eventually went vegan and became one of the most powerful activists of our time right now, and very influential. Well, it's a domino effect. Like, you don't know who you're going to impact, you know? So it's like, was that a waste of time? I don't know. And again, I don't even see it so much as that. I see it more as we owe it to people. You know, like, we're helping the animals, but we're helping the people understand that they are part of an injustice. A lot of people don't even recognize that. They don't know that. So it's like, I feel an obligation to help people as well understand that. So I would just tell the person that, you know, I think we disagree. I think that you think what I'm doing is a waste of time and ineffective, and maybe my time could be better spent doing something else. But we can always judge ourselves or challenge ourselves. And there's no one right way. Like, everything is necessary. I used to feel like vigils were a waste of time back when I first started doing activism. I was like, who are you helping? Like, use that time wisely. Go speak out and do outreach. But I've changed my perspective because I recognize that everything is important. Everything is important. Everything matters. All forms of activism, in my opinion, matter. And maybe my skill set as a human, as a person, maybe I'm better at outreaching than I am at lobbying. Maybe you're better at lobbying than you are at outreach. Maybe this person is better at this. Maybe this person is better. We need to come at it from all angles, in my opinion.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. That was such a great answer, Juan. I know that there's so much more to this discussion that, again, we probably need to have a part 2, part 3, part 4, and so on and so on and so on. But we're gonna have to wrap up. Juan, thank you so much. And, you know, for those of you, stay with us for another minute here. If you want to put into the chat any of your takeaways for today, anything that you were reminded of, or anything that you learned that was new that you want to share in the chat, what you're going to walk away with, and maybe what you're going to implement, as well as your Instagram handles or your Facebook profiles that you'd like to add in there. If somebody would do me a favor, one of the mentors, maybe put AAM's website in the chat for me, and our YouTube channel link, that would be greatly appreciated. So let me see, get to my notes just to wrap up.
So one thing, can I add one thing?
Yes, you can.
There's probably a ton of questions, and I'm happy to you know, set up a one-on-one with anybody that would like to have a discussion or you know, finding some challenges in their outreach. Feel free to reach out to me, please, at Vegan Willow on my Instagram. I just put it into the chat. Send me a message. We can do a phone call, or we can communicate through Messenger, whatever easier or best for you. I'm happy to do so, because I learn from all of you as well, and we're constantly evolving, constantly learning. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm sure, you know, we can help each other.
Thank you, Juan. That's very generous of you, and not surprising, of course. And that's why AAM is here. That's why Juan is one of our mentors, because we love to share and pay it forward, share the information, so we create more activists and ultimately reach that animal liberation. So that being said, at the close of our workshop now, I'm going to announce a few of the upcoming workshops. April 28th, we have the power of language in activism with Emily from Bite Size Vegan. On May 3rd, we have handling the police, tips for being a police liaison. On May 19th, we have writing and publishing as activism. On May 24th, we have the plant-based treaty with Anita, executive director of the SAVE movement. On June 6th, we have security culture, staying safe as an activist, and many more to be announced. Also, we want to announce the AAM Chicago Convergence 2022, which is a 10-day animal rights activism event that will be largely focused on taking action against the fur industry, but will also include actions for animal suffering in the animal agriculture industries. That's July 29th through August 7th. And then we also have the Tampa Turnout, which is May 6th through 8th coming up. 3 days of action in Tampa for the animals, outreach, demos, protests, and a march. So all of those specifics can be found on our page and in our group. So unless somebody wants to put the links into the chat right now. And with that being said, we hope to see you next time. Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you, Juan, for your time and wisdom.
Thank you so much.
In becoming a mentor or mentee or want to get more involved, reach out to us through animalactivismmentorship.com. Then until next time, stay strong, everyone, and live vegan. Thank you all so much.
Thank you all. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.